And as I told you, after pulse, jugular venous pressure, S2, apex, auscultation is one of the important things. And apart from second heart sound, murmurs are the important aspect in cardiology. I think from our MBBS days, all of us were very excited about a murmur. Let it be systolic, let it be diastolic, and continuous murmurs. And most of the murmurs we usually are not able to pick up at the level of MBBS. However, as our knowledge and understanding increases during MD times, we start picking some murmurs. And as you progress to at DM level, your knowledge may increase further, and you may be able to pick further classical, non-classical murmurs like AR murmur or short to mid diastolic murmurs of mitral stenosis and all. So each murmur has a different characteristic and property. So let us discuss today an important approach to cardiac murmurs. I will try to show some of the images. I try to get the videos, but audios, but for some technical reasons, I was not able to. However, I'll try to forward it to Sanket and he will try to forward it to you. So let's start. So over the next maybe 1.5 hours, I will try to discuss the cardiac murmurs over all these topics. So now what are cardiac murmurs? We usually define it as a abnormal flow through a normal valve or a normal flow through an abnormal valve. This is how we used to define it before. However, a cardiac murmur is a relatively prolonged series of auditory vibrations can call duration. So there are different mechanisms with the most current with the other murmur. When we come to the mechanism of murmur production, most important thing is the turbulence of the blood flow. It's the turbulent blood flow either through a normal valve or an abnormal valve. And what determines this characteristic property of the murmur is the Reynolds number. We have been this thing from our physiology classes, and the Reynolds number is nothing but it is proportional to the flow and inversely proportional to the diameter and the viscosity of the fluid. So suppose there is a patient with polycythemia. So we know that in patients with polycythemia, we do not get a good murmur. The reason being the viscosity is high in patients with polycythemia, and so the Reynolds number is less, and so we do not get a good high intensity murmur. So anything which is less than 2000 Reynolds number is a laminar flow, and anything which is more than 2000, it is a turbulence flow. So 2000 usually we get a good intensity murmurs. So this is one thing which you should always remember in patients with murmur, that is anemia causes a high intensity murmur because of low viscosity, and polycythemia produces a low intensity murmur because of high viscosity. Now, a murmur is always discussed over all these points. Let it be timing where we know it can be systolic, it can be diastolic, it can be continuous. Location, we know the murmurs are best heard over the 4 or 5 places, that is the aortic area, pulmonary area, lower left sternal border in tricuspid, or it can be mitral area. Also, there is something known as the neo-aortic area, which is the left, second, third, and fourth intercostal space where the aortic regurgitation murmur is best heard. Also, there are other atypical places where the murmur can either conduct or radiate. So it can go to the axilla, it can go to the base of the heart, it can go to the carotids. It can go to either carotids. It can go to the left infraclavicular area where the PDA, patent ductus or arteriosus murmur is best heard. So these are the various locations. Duration can be a, can you just, is it possible to excuse me for just 1 minute? Yeah, sorry. Slides are not moving. Yeah. So then we come to the duration. It can be a long murmur. It can be a short murmur. So usually we know the longer the murmur, the severe is the lesion. Usually this is accountable more for a stenotic lesions like a mitral stenosis, where a longer murmur correlates well with the severity. However, in cases of even aortic regurgitation, a long hollow diastolic murmur can correlate with the severity. Then we have different intensity. The murmur intensity can be high or it can be low. It can be high pitch, it can be low pitch. So frequency can be a high pitch or it can be a low pitch. Intensity can be loud or it can be harsh. So there are various intensities which we can discuss. Then there are various configurations like a holosystolic or a holodiastolic. It can be ejection systolic, which is a crescendo decrescendo. Then some murmurs are only decrescendo like a AR murmur. So decrescendo can be a systolic decrescendo or it can be a diastolic decrescendo. Then there is something known as a mid systolic, which is only crescendo. So there are various configurations of a murmur. Then there is a transmission. We always discuss that there is something called as conduction, and then there is something called as radiation. Those two things not very much. Nowadays we use it synonymously, both a conduction and a radiation, but there is a very minor or a subtle differentiation between these two. Then there is something known as a dynamic auscultation, which you should do for all the patients in all the murmur. Let it be respiration, inspiration or expiration, positional like on standing or on lying down. Then it can be left lateral position or sitting position. It can be drugs like amyl nitrate, or it can be maneuvers like Muller's maneuver, Valsalva maneuvers. It can be isometric exercises like the hand grip and squatting. So these are the various dynamic auscultation which we should do in all murmurs. However, for time's sake, today we are not going to discuss the dynamic auscultation. It is a full class in itself, so I will take it some other day. Now let's discuss the timing of the murmur. So the murmurs can be systolic murmur, it can be diastolic murmur, and it can be continuous murmur. Now both the systolic and the diastolic murmurs are again systolic murmurs are divided into, it can be early systolic, it can be mid systolic, or it can be hollow systolic. So we'll come to it one by one. Now a diastolic murmur can be early diastolic or it can be a holodiastolic. However, systolic can even be a late systolic murmur, which we see classically in mitral valve prolapse. Now, next classification is a continuous murmur. We know the continuous murmurs, they are both during the inspiration, both during the systole and the diastole, and then they encompasses the second heart sound. You may not be able to hear the second heart sound because the murmur encases the second heart sound in itself. So that is a continuous murmur. Now, this is a cardiac cycle I have already discussed in last many classes. We usually draw the diagram of a murmur. So many times in your exam, they will ask you to draw the diagram of many of this murmurs. So you have to make a systole and you have to make a diastole. And systole should always be shorter than the diastole because systole is 0.3 second, diastole is 0.5 second. So the diastole should always be longer. You should know which are the systolic murmurs, which are the diastolic murmurs, and you should know because when we draw a murmur, we should know that if time the it means the murmur is smaller, it means the murmur is softer in intensity. So these are the few things which you should know. Let's go to the now. So this is according to the location of the murmur. As I already discussed with you, there is aortic area where the aortic stenosis murmur is best heard, or even the area where a lot of murmurs are heard. Let it be pulmonary stenosis murmur. It can be ejection murmurs of atrial septal defect or idiopathic dilatation of the pulmonary artery. So few murmurs are best heard in the pulmonary area. Then we have Erb's area where the aortic regurgitation murmur is best heard. We have the tricuspid area where the murmurs of tricuspid regurgitation and ventricular septal defects are best heard, and even the hypertrophic cardiomyopathy is better heard in the lower left sternal border. Then we have the mitral area where your mitral stenosis and mitral regurgitation murmurs are best heard. So these are the area-wise description where each of the murmur is best heard. Now let's go into shorter detail about each of this. So now, as I already discussed with you, the second left intercostal space, which murmur is sorry, second right intercostal space, which murmur is best heard is the aortic stenosis murmur. Now, I will try to discuss in shorter each of this murmur so that I do not have to repeat again and again. Now, whenever you are, just can you just excuse me? Yeah. So the second right intercostal space, it is the aortic stenosis murmur. Now, the aortic stenosis murmur, it is a harsh murmur. It is a very high pitched murmur. It is a harsh, it is a high pitched murmur, and it is usually a ejection systolic. Now, nowadays we have stopped using the word ejection systolic because ejection systolics are used only for flow murmurs and not for an organic murmur. So, aortic stenosis murmur being an organic murmur, it is a mid systolic murmur. It is a mid systolic murmur. It is a harsh murmur. It is a high pitched murmur. It can have even medium intensities. Best heard in the aortic area. It radiates to the left carotid. We know it radiates to the left carotid, and it is usually associated with a thrill. A thrill signifies that the aortic stenosis is severe. So thrill signifies that the aortic stenosis is severe. And there are few things which tells that this murmur is severe, like if we have a late peaking aortic stenosis murmur, it is severe. If there is an associated paradoxical split, it is severe. If you have a S4 associated with it, it is severe. If you have a heaving apex, it is severe. And most importantly, if you have a pulsus parvus et tardus, it is severe. So if a aortic stenosis murmur is associated with all these things, it is a severe aortic stenosis. So how do you describe this murmur is, it is a grade 4/6 if it is a thrill, it is a harsh, it is a mid-systolic murmur, which is late peaking, best heard with the diaphragm of the stethoscope, with the breath held in end expiration because it is a left side event, with the patient sitting and leaning forward. Why we do this? Because in both AS and AR, aorta comes anteriorly, and that is why these murmurs are better heard in sitting and leaning forward position, and it radiates to the left carotid. So when you have to discuss aortic stenosis murmur, this is how you have to discuss the aortic stenosis murmur. Now, let us go to the next area, which is the pulmonary area. So the murmurs which are better heard in the pulmonary areas are the pulmonary regurgitation murmur and the pulmonary stenosis murmur. So the pulmonary stenosis murmur, it's again a mid-systolic murmur, which we here in, it is a mid-systolic murmur. Again, there are few characteristic things which you have to always tell, that it may be associated with thrill, that becomes a grade 4/6 murmur. Then if it is a late peaking, it is a severe murmur. It can radiate anywhere. It can radiate to the back. It can radiate to the left side of the carotid. And it can, so these are the places where it can radiate. Now there are few things which are associated with pulmonary stenosis. You should always know that most of the time you get a ejection click. So pulmonary stenosis, you get a phasic ejection click. Why it is called phasic? Because that is the only right-sided event which decreases on inspiration. All the right-sided event increases on inspiration, but the pulmonary stenosis click is the only right-sided event which decreases on inspiration, which I will come into in detail later. Now, it is associated with the soft S2 because there is a stenotic pulmonary valve. There is a click, there is a late peaking murmur. Now, because of the pulmonary stenosis, the second heart sound is split. So, wider the split, the severe is the pulmonary stenosis. It is a kite-shaped murmur. It is a crescendo-decrescendo murmur. It is also called a kite-shaped murmur. And the click, as the click approaches near to the S1, the first heart sound, it is a more severe pulmonary stenosis. So, the indicators of severity are a soft, late peaking murmur, a wider split second heart sound, and a click which is closer, narrow click, narrow S1 click duration. So that signifies that it is a significant pulmonary stenosis. As you go lower down, you get a up space. That is the third left intercostal space where you get a aortic regurgitation murmur. Now, aortic regurgitation murmur, we know it is a high pitched murmur. It is a diastolic murmur, and it can be early diastolic or it can be hollow diastolic. Now, as I told you, More severe the aortic regurgitation, it is a longer diastolic murmur. So hollow diastolic murmur, we usually either do not grade a diastolic murmur, or you can even grade up to 4, because any diastolic murmur is a organic, it can't be a functional. So it's a diastolic murmur, best heard with the, again, the diaphragm, patient sitting and leaning forward, in the breath held in expiration. It is a high pitched murmur, and then it may or may not be associated with the thrill. So what are the indicator? And it is a blowing murmur. You get a sound like you blow in a empty glass bottle. So that is how you get the sound of a aortic regurgitation murmur. Now what tells you that aortic regurgitation murmur is severe is the length of the murmur and peripheral signs. So peripheral signs suggest peripheral runoff. So more than, say, if you have a Hill signs, that is the BP difference between the upper and lower limb of more than 40, it is a significant Hill sign. So 40 to 60 is moderate, more than 60 is severe. But anything more than 40, you may be able to get other peripheral signs of aortic regurgitation. So this is about the murmur of aortic regurgitation. You go further down, you will get a murmur of in tricuspid area. The murmurs best heard here are the tricuspid regurgitation and tricuspid stenosis. And as you go down to the apex, you get the murmur of mitral regurgitation and mitral stenosis. Now let us discuss this murmurs in detail as you come down to the further slides. So it is important the duration and the level length of the murmur. So the length of the murmur can be a short murmur, or it can be a long or a hollow systolic or a hollow diastolic murmur. As I told you, it reflects the severity in stenotic lesion. So out of the all lesions, the most two important lesions where a length of the murmur determines the severity is aortic regurgitation and mitral stenosis. So only in these two cases you should tell that the longer the murmur, the severe is the disease. You should not tell in aortic stenosis. In aortic stenosis, you should tell that a late peaking murmur is severe, whereas in mitral regurgitation, even a moderate mitral regurgitation can have a pansystolic murmur. So even a TS and a TR, it doesn't make much difference in the length of the murmur. So next is the intensity of the murmur. I think this is something which you will be learning from your MBBS days. We know that all the murmurs, systolic murmurs, are graded up to 6. And it was Freeman and Levine who gave the grading of systolic murmurs. It is better if you remember this grading from higher to lower. That is a grade 6, which is very less likely to be heard. It is a murmur audible with a stethoscope half an inch away from the chest wall, and it is associated with the thrill. So we know this thing, it is associated with the thrill, and it is heard with the stethoscope away from the chest wall. Grade 5 with the heard with the stethoscope just in the chest wall. It won't touch the chest wall, just away from the chest wall. So most of the PDA murmurs or rupture of sinus of Valsalva, they are continuous murmurs, and they can be even grade 5. Grade 4 murmurs are which are associated with thrill, like a VSD murmur or mitral regurgitation murmurs, or even a pulmonary stenosis murmurs, aortic stenosis, which are usually associated with a thrill. Most of the times we are able to hear a grade 3 murmur where the murmur is easily audible, but there is no thrill. So up to grade 3, you should remember, because the grade 2 murmur is easily audible but not loud. It is just audible. So that is how we determine the grading. It is better if you do not grade a diastolic murmur. Even if you grade it up to the 4. The reason being, all the diastolic murmurs are organic and significant, and that is why we do not grade a diastolic murmur. This is something which is important for you, because low pitch, medium pitch, and high pitch, there is nothing to compare. So what determines a pitch is, is determined by few things. One, the flow between the two chambers. Example, LA and the LV, the mitral stenosis, the LA and the LV. So how much is the flow between the two? And flow is always determined by the gradient. So larger the gradient, let it be LA to LV, aorta to LV, RV to PA. Larger the gradient, the pitch is high. So why a mitral stenosis is low pitch? Because there is hardly any gradient between the LA and the LV. And why the MR murmur is high pitch or a VSD murmur is high pitch? Because there is significant gradient between the LV and the RV, and significant gradient between the systolic pressure in the LV and LA pressure. That is why those murmurs are high pitch. So this is the important thing where your pitch is related. So murmurs can be low pitch, medium pitch, high pitch. We know in your exam they may ask you which are the low pitched events. So we know the mitral stenosis mid diastolic murmur is a low pitched. I already told you the reason, because the gradient is not much between the LA and the LV. So most of the mid diastolic murmurs are low pitched, except Austin Flint murmur, which is a mid diastolic, but it is a high pitched murmur. Most of the other mid diastolic murmurs are low pitched. When do you call a low pitch? It is a 25, less than 125 hertz. It's all theoretical, but you should know less than 125 hertz is low pitched and the pressure gradient is less. So that is why it is a rough and then rumbling murmur. As compared to, let's go to the high pitched, all the regurgitation like MR, AR, where the gradient is very high, you get a high pitched murmur and it is more than 300 hertz. All the high pitched murmurs are blowing murmurs, like MR murmur, which is soft and blowing, AR murmur, which is soft and blowing, and sometimes it can be even musical murmurs. Where do you get medium pitch? We usually tell that aortic stenosis is a high pitch, but it has also the medium pitch with it. And a medium pitch is something between 125 to 300 hertz. And those are harsh and rough murmurs, like a AS murmur. We tell it is a harsh and a rough murmur. So for your all exam sake, they may ask you which are the low pitch events. We discussed in the last class, S3 and S4 are low pitched. MS and other mid diastolic murmurs, except Austin Flint murmurs, are low pitched, whereas most of the other events like S1, S2, murmurs of MR, AR, your pericardial rub, your opening snap, these are high pitched events. So low pitched events are better heard with the bell of the stethoscope, whereas high pitched events are better heard with the diaphragm of the stethoscope. Now, this is just a figure to tell you why I told you uh, pitch is important. See, MR murmur is high pitched because it is a systolic event, and in systole the LV pressure is 120 and LA pressure is 12. So see how much gap gradient is there, 120 minus 12. Example, in aortic stenosis, again it is a high pitch. Why? Because the pressure in systole in the LV is 220 and in the aorta it is 100, and that is why the gradient of 120 is there. Now let us take a mitral stenosis. See, the gradient so less. LA pressure will be 25 and LV end diastolic pressure will be around 8 to 10. So hardly 15 gradient is there, and that is why higher the LA pressure, longer is the murmur. So anything which increase the LA pressure like tachycardia or associated mitral regurgitation, where LA pressure goes up, the gradient increases, and that is why the length of the murmur increases. Now come to the aortic regurgitation. It is a diastolic event. In diastole, LV EDP is around 10 and aortic pressure is around 80. And so you can see the so much high gradient is there between the aorta and the LV, and that is why they are high frequency murmurs. So this is where the important. Now let's come to the configuration or the shape of the murmur. Now, as I already discussed, people will tell you to draw this murmur, and I have just set a prototype of all this. You can see there is nothing in hollow diastolic. Somebody tells you how do you draw a hollow diastolic, between S1 and S2 you have to draw a line of equal intensity. So that is called a hollow systolic murmur, or a hollow diastolic if they have to tell you to draw. We know the causes of hollow systolic are three: MR, PR, and VSD. These are the classical examples. Others are there, but somebody asks you, these are the classical examples of hollow systolic: MR, mitral regurgitation, tricuspid regurgitation, and a ventricular septal defect, which is moderate size. I'll come to it why I am telling it a moderate size. However, there are murmurs like a crescendo, decrescendo murmurs. I have already told you few examples. All the ejection murmurs, which we call it a mid-systolic murmur nowadays, let it be aortic stenosis, let it be hypertrophic cardiomyopathy on the left side. On the right side, let it be a pulmonary hypertension murmur or pulmonary stenosis, which is a kite-shaped murmur. So they are the crescendo, decrescendo. And important thing is The severe is the lesion, the late is the peaking. So you can draw the late peaking in this murmurs. So the late peaking suggests severe lesion. Now there are some murmurs which are systolic decrescendo, and these are the acute MR murmur and acute TR murmur. So acute murmurs, acute regurgitant lesions have a decrescendo systolic phase, whereas diastolic decrescendo are the early diastolic murmurs of pulmonary regurgitation and early diastolic murmurs of aortic regurgitation. And it can be hollow diastolic, which we have to draw the same way as a hollow systolic. Some people also call it as a pan-systolic or a hollow systolic. Now there is something known as a continuous murmur, where the murmur will be heard both in the systole and the diastole. You may not get a separate S2 because it encases the second heart sound, and it may stop just before the next first heart sound. So the peaking, this is some important, because in PDA is the only continuous murmur where you get a peaking at second heart sound. So it is the only continuous murmur PDA which peaks at the second heart sound, and so you can draw a diagram like that. We will come to it over the next few slides. Now, as I already discussed you, the transmission of murmur is important, but at your level, I feel you should not try to differentiate between a conduction and a radiation, because at present, it doesn't make much difference whether you call it a conduction or a radiation. Like we know, like a aortic stenosis murmur, the systolic murmur, it conducts, or you can also tell it radiates to the carotid. It can mostly common goes to the right carotid. It can also go to the left carotid. Whereas a mitral regurgitation murmur goes both to the axilla and to the base. So if it involves the anterior leaflet, it goes posteriorly, which is more commonly in cases of rheumatic mitral regurgitation. Whereas if it is a mitral valve prolapse, it involves a posterior leaflet and it goes to the base of the heart. So this is how we try to see the conduction and the radiation. So also it determines if the murmur is loud and soft. Louder murmurs are transmitted widely, whereas the softer murmurs like a mitral stenosis murmurs are confined to their places like a mitral area. Again, it is important whether it is a high frequency and low frequency. High frequency like mitral regurgitation can go to the apex, and also aortic stenosis can go to the carotid and to the base of the heart. So these are the few things which are important. Now, before I go to each of this murmur, I just wanted to ask if there are any doubts. We'll take, because this being a very important and a longer session, I thought we'll go slow. So, Sanket, anything from your side?
Hello.
Yeah.
Sir.
So anything I can proceed?
Yeah. Difference between conduction and radiation briefly, can you give? That's one question.
Yeah. So before and all, people used to tell that a conduction and a radiation differs. Now, why they used to tell is, example, let us take a aortic stenosis murmur. So in aortic stenosis, it is the flow is going from the LV to the valve to a different area. So where, as compared to mitral regurgitation, see, a mitral regurgitation murmur conducts to the axilla. Now, why we are telling it conduction? Because there is anatomical continuity. So anything which is in the same anatomical continuity is a conduction. Whereas something which is not in the anatomical continuity, like a aortic stenosis, which from your aortic valve goes to the carotid, it is a radiation. So conduction is a transmission through anatomical continuity, whereas the radiation is through a place without anatomical continuity. So that is how people divide it. Used to divide, but nowadays those terms are not used much. Like a MR, as I told you, it can go to the, if a MR goes to the base, it is a conduction. If it goes to the axilla, because it's the same MR murmur which you are able to listen. So that is why it is a conduction within anatomical continuity. Hope it is clear, right?
Yes, sir. Yes.
So I'll proceed to the systolic murmurs. Now the systolic murmur is one of the important topic, because It has too many differential. It can be early systolic, mid systolic, ejection systolic, hollow systolic, or it can be late systolic. Now we'll try to cover each of this murmur. However, we'll try to cover the important murmur. Now this is a very big diagram where the differential diagnosis of systolic murmur is there. Now let us come to one by one. So let's start with the early systolic murmur. Now we know that mitral regurgitation, tricuspid regurgitation, and VSD classically produces pan-systolic murmur. So if you can see in the diagram, those three have pan-systolic murmur. But all these three, if they are acute, because in acute MR, in acute TR, there is hardly much gradient between the LV and the LA or RV and the RA. So the murmur stops very shortly as soon as the gradient comes down. So you get an early decrescendo systolic murmur. So the typical examples of early systolic murmur are acute MR and acute TR. Now, even a ventricular septal defect, if it is a small defect, because the smaller defect are either close by the muscular septum in muscular VSD or membranous septal aneurysm in perimembranous VSD. So the murmur closes, and that is why you get an early systolic murmur. Also, if the VSD is very big, a very big VSD, because the gradient won't be there between the LV and the RV, you will get a short systolic or early systolic murmur. So if it is a very big VSD or if it is a very small VSD, both places you may get a short systolic or a early systolic murmur. Also a ventricular septal defect, if it is associated with pulmonary artery hypertension, you may not get a pan-systolic or you may just get a short systolic murmur. So these are the typical examples of early systolic murmur. Now let us discuss which murmurs are now mid-systolic. Now mid-systolic murmurs as I already told you, they can be functional murmur or they can be organic murmur. There is one more thing which is known as innocent murmur, which we usually see in children 3 to 8 years, or which we in the pulmonary and the aortic area. Now they can be functional or organic murmur. The functional murmurs are those which are the flow murmurs. Example, atrial septal defect because of increased flow through the pulmonary valve, or a ventricular septal defect because of the increased flow through the pulmonary valve, you get a functional murmur. All the murmurs because of aortic root dilatation, because of the systemic hypertension, because of idiopathic dilatation of the pulmonary artery, and because of pulmonary artery hypertension, you get a functional murmurs. Significant aortic regurgitation is always associated with increased flow murmur, that it mimics a aortic stenosis murmur, and people may ask you, how do you tell that it is organic or it is a functional AS? So you go by other findings like a late peaking, paradoxical split, and usually this functional murmur do not radiate to the carotids. So AR can be associated with functional AS also. Or there are hyperkinetic states like anemia, pregnancy, thyrotoxicosis, which are associated with functional murmur. We are more concerned with the organic mid-systolic murmur, which can be across the pulmonary valve or which can be across the aortic valve. Aortic valve are typical two examples. It is fixed LVOTO like aortic stenosis, and it can be a dynamic LVOTO like a hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Whereas you get a mid-systolic murmur on the right side in patients with pulmonary stenosis. So these are the typical examples. Sometimes a papillary muscle dysfunction, mitral regurgitation can both be early systolic, it can be mid systolic, it can be late systolic. Now let us go to the pan systolic murmur. I think this is a classical triad: VSD, chronic, severe TR, and severe MR. Chronic, they have pan systolic murmur. However, there are few other differentials like a EP window with pulmonary artery hypertension or a patent ductus arteriosus with we know that a patent ductus arteriosus produces a continuous murmur. However, if the PDA has high PAH, like in newborns and infants where the venous hypertension is there, or in patients with severe PAH where the diastolic component is the first to cut off and you get only a systolic murmur. So these are the rare examples of a pan-systolic murmur. Now late systolic murmur, the typical example is mitral valve prolapse. We'll discuss Why a mitral valve prolapse produces a late systolic murmur? However, it is associated with a normal or a loud first heart sound as compared with a rheumatic MR where the first heart sound is soft. It is associated with a mid systolic click. It is a late systolic murmur, and there are many dynamic auscultations which we have to do to bring out this murmur. Now let's go to the, here I'll try to be brief because it will be very difficult to discuss in detail each of this. So as I told you, early systolic murmurs are acute MR, acute TR, and a VSD. Now acute MR, the first thing it begins with the S1. It is a decrescendo murmur, and it starts a short time after a S1. It ends well before the S2. It is a high pitched murmur, and it is a decrescendo murmur. Now, why it happens is, normally in chronic MR, we know the pressure gradient between the LA and the LV is very high. In acute MR, because all the blood goes from the LV to the LA, and LA is not dilated, it is a normal size, non-compliant LA. So the gradient, LA pressure becomes very high, and the gradient between the LV and the LA is very small, and so the gradient is abolished in early systole. Means late, it is abolished later during the systole, and it's there only in the early part of the systole. So that is why you get a apical short MR murmur. It can be in acute MI like a papillary muscle dysfunction, caudal rupture, papillary muscle rupture, or you can still get it in infective endocarditis also. You also get it into the myxomatous mitral valve disease due to the rupture of the chordae or due to the blunt chest injury. You can get this type of murmurs. Now, next murmur which I told you is a ventricular septal defect murmur, which can be early systolic. In a muscular VSD, you get an early systolic because the muscular septum closes the ventricular septal defect, whereas in perimembranous VSD, it is the perimembranous septal aneurysm which closes the VSD, and that is why you get only a early systolic murmur. Whereas in a very large VSD and the VSD with high PA pressure, the gradient between the LV and the RV abolishes, and that is why you do not get a pan-systolic murmur. You get only a early systolic murmur. So it is only the moderately sized restrictive VSD. The term is moderately sized restrictive VSD where you get a holosystolic murmur. Now let's come to the next thing, which is the mid-systolic or the ejection murmur. So the important is it does not start immediately after the first heart sound. There is a short time interval after which the gradient develops, and that time you get a S murmur, and it ends well before the second heart sound. It is either the flow through a RVOT or the flow through a LVOT, and these murmurs are crescendo, decrescendo. It depends on the cardiac output. Later is the peaking, more severe is the murmur like aortic stenosis, HCM, and pulmonary stenosis. Now, as I told you, it can be innocent murmur, it can be functional murmur. As I already told you, pathologic are few ones. So let's discuss the aortic stenosis. I have already discussed with you. It is a harsh, it is a rough murmur. It can be medium pitch to the high pitch, best heard in the aortic area, radiates well to the carotids, to both the carotids. If it is a Gallaverdin, what is Gallaverdin is in patients with a sclerotic aortic valve, because there are eddy currents. The eddy currents means the high frequencies are transmitted to the apex, and you get high frequency murmur at the apex. So that are the Gallaverdin phenomena. And the murmur severity varies. If it is an early peaking, it is less severe. It is a late peaking, it is a severe murmur. Associated pulses parvus et tardus is severe murmur. Paradoxical split is severe murmur. Apicocarotid delay is severe murmur. S4 present is severe murmur, and thrill is a severe murmur. So these are the things which tells that, and a heaving apex is a severe murmur. So these are the things which tells that there is a severe aortic stenosis. As compared to, people may ask you what is the difference between a sclerotic aortic valve murmur and a AS murmur. Sclerotic aortic valve murmur usually radiates to the apex, called as Gallaverdin. It may even radiate to the carotid. However, it's not late peaking. It doesn't cause heaving apex. S2 may be loud in a sclerotic aortic valve, not like a softer in severe AS. There is no apicocarotid delay, no late peaking, no paradoxical split. So all other things are not there in a sclerotic aortic valve as compared with a degenerative severe AS murmur. Now this is the picture which tells you the mid systolic murmur. You can see there is a crescendo and then there is a decrescendo. So later is the peaking, severe is the murmur. Now you see the LV pressure is 120 and the aortic pressure is normally 120 in a normal people, where that is why you do not get a murmur. In patient with aortic stenosis, LV pressure becomes very high. It goes up to 200. Aortic pressure is very less reduced. It becomes same 100 to 110, and that is why the murmur uh, you get a gradient, and that is why you get a murmur. Now here the important is the dynamic auscultation. Which are the things which increases the AS murmur is anything which decreases the aortic pressure, like 110 will decrease, like a amyl nitrate. Amyl nitrate decreases the aortic pressure, and so the gradient increases. Whereas if anything which increases the aortic pressure, like a hand grip, so a hand grip or isometric exercises, phenylephrine, methoxamine, it increases the SVR, it increases the aortic pressure, and the gradient between the LV and the outer comes down, and so the murmur intensity comes down. And that is why I wanted to focus on this dynamic auscultation, and that is why it increases. Also, the expiration and sitting and leaning forward increases the aortic stenosis murmur. Now, as I already discussed with you, Gala-Verdin phenomena is very important because they will ask you, it is the same sclerotic aortic valve murmur because of the eddy currents, the high frequency sounds goes to the apex, and the most frequent differential diagnosis is a mitral regurgitation. People will ask you whether it is a MR or it is a sclerotic aortic valve, because it mimics a pan-systolic murmur. Now the difference is, as I already told you, the isometric exercises like the hand grip and all, it increases the MR murmur. However, it decreases the AS murmur because the gradient decreases. If one typical finding is the post PVC, the MR murmur after a PVC, there is no much difference. There is a wrongly typed MR murmur post PVC, nothing happen. Whereas a PVC, there is a great beat to beat variation in a aortic stenosis murmur because it is a outflow murmur. That is why beat to beat variation is there in aortic stenosis murmur. A MR murmur doesn't have a beat to beat variation. Amyl nitrate decreases the aortic pressure, so AS murmur increases, whereas the amyl nitrate decreases the SVR, and so the MR murmur decreases. So this is how you have to distinguish between a MR murmur and a AS murmur. Location is important, but in Gala-Verdin, sometimes it becomes confusing. Shape is important. MR murmur, the best intensity is from the beginning to the end. AS murmur, the initial part is a decreased intensity, and that is how you may be able to differentiate. The both may be high pitch. So the difference is the post PVC amyl nitrate and isometric exercises. Now there are various types of aortic stenosis like a valvular, subvalvular, and a supravalvular. People may ask you the difference between this. It is very important. Let's start from the beginning. There is something known as the supravalvular AS, which you get in children with Williams syndrome. So they may have a family history in supravalvular AS. You may get a typical Elfin phases of Williams syndrome, and we know supravalvular AS because there is a selective streaming of the blood in the left innominate artery, and that is why you get a right upper limb BP which is more than the left upper limb BP, which is known as the Coanda effect. Most of you would have heard the Coanda effect. The right upper limb BP is more than the left upper limb BP. You do not get this in the patient with valvular and subvalvular. Thrill usually is typical of a valvular. So thrill is usually typical of a valvular thing, but you may still get the thrill in others. But a thrill is it localizes the murmur. So best thrill you get in valvular. Ejection sound, you know the ejection sound, again it localizes anything to the valve, and the ejection click is present only in valvular aortic stenosis. The murmur is best heard in valvular AS in the right second intercostal space. In the supravalvular, in the right first intercostal space, whereas in subvalvular, like hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, you get it in lower sternal border, like the fourth and the fifth lower left sternal border. We know the AR is associated most commonly with subvalvular. So subvalvular has a maximum AR followed by valvular. Supravalvular usually do not have associated AR. So this is how we differentiate between a valvular, subvalvular, and a supravalvular. So the next thing, important thing, is a hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Now let's go to the hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. We know there are few things which distinguishes it from aortic stenosis. It is a mid-systolic murmur which is best heard in the lower left sternal border. Important thing is it doesn't radiate into the neck like the aortic stenosis. In aortic stenosis, you get a pulsus parvus et tardus, like a small volume and late peaking. Here the carotid upstrokes are very brisk. You get a Bispherians pulse or a bifid pulse in hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Second heart sound is soft in AS. Second heart sound is normal in hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. AS, you get a heaving apex. In hypertrophic, you get a double or triple apical impulse. But the most important thing which distinguishes it from AS is dynamic auscultation, and that is why it is more important. Now let's come to it one by one. Now let's see the things like in patients with on standing, what happened. On standing, we know the blood volume or venous return decreases. So all the murmurs of both the right sided and left sided decreases, except two murmurs, which are the mitral valve prolapse and the hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. In hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, what happens is on standing, the LV volume and dimension comes down. So as the LV size decreases, the systolic anterior motion or the dynamic LVOTO becomes more prominent. And that is why you get a higher increased gradient and a higher intensity of the murmur on standing. And the similar thing which happens is Valsalva. On Valsalva, the LV cardiac output decreases, and that is why AS murmur decreases. Whereas in HCM, because cardiac output decreases, LV cavity decreases, you get more LVOTO, dynamic LVOTO, which causes the increased gradient and increased intensity of the murmur. So like Valsalva, other things are standing and amyl nitrate. I told you amyl nitrate increases the murmur of the aortic stenosis because the gradient increases. Because it decreases the murmur of the hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. It increases the murmur of both this and hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Now, what increases the murmur of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy is squatting, something like a squatting. In squatting, what happens is more of the SVR increases, increased blood flow goes to the LV cavity size increases. When the LV cavity size increases, the dynamic LVOTO decreases, and that is why you get a higher a slow decreased intensity of the murmur. So anything which increases the LV cavity size will decrease the intensity of a hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. So these are the dynamic auscultation which differentiate a AS and a hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Let's discuss again standing on from supine to standing. What happened? The blood flow decreases, the cavity size decreases. Once the cavity size decreases, you get an increased intensity of the murmur. Again on so the first is the supine position. The next is the middle part is the standing position, where you get the increased intensity of the murmur and increased duration of the murmur. Last is the squatting, where the LV cavity size increases, and so you get the smaller murmur and you get the decreased intensity of the murmur. So these three are the important things. Now again, I will tell you, respiratory doesn't make much difference to the AS. We know on expiration it may increase, but dynamic LVOT, it makes more of a difference. On standing, AS murmur decreases, LV HOCM increases. On squatting, HOCM decreases, AS murmur increases. Valsalva, the AS murmur decreases, the HCM murmur increases. The concept remains the same, it doesn't differ. There is something known as the Brokenberg-Brownman phenomena, which I'll try to cover it in further slides, because it becomes more confusing here. It is not a, but it is a cath finding, which let's discuss later. Now come to the pulmonary stenosis murmur. Again, I'll tell you, I have discussed it. It is a mid-systolic murmur where more severe is the, you can see it in the image, more severe is the pulmonary stenosis, late peaking is the murmur. You get a kite-shaped murmur and you get a typical click, ejection click, where the click decreases on inspiration. Now, why it decreases on inspiration is, on inspiration, the venous return increases. When the venous return increases, the RV end diastolic pressure increases. And when the RV end diastolic pressure increases, there is a premature early opening. There is a premature early opening of the pulmonary valve. So the valve open from a shorter distance because the RV EDP has increased beyond the pulmonary pressures before the time. So before time only means the valve is opening from a smaller distance, and that is why you get it decreases on inspiration. So the pulmonary ejection click, more closer it is to the S1, the severe is the pulmonary stenosis. The wider the split, more severe the of the second heart sound, more severe is the pulmonary stenosis. So in the severe pulmonary stenosis, the murmur may even go up to the P2, and sometimes you may not be able to hear the P2 component, which is very soft, may not be able to hear. So these are the things which determine the severity of pulmonary stenosis and which tells you the murmur of pulmonary stenosis. Other things like the functional things like a dilated aorta, dilated pulmonary trunk, already I discussed, and you can get in hyperdynamic circulations or like anemia, pregnancy, thyrotoxicosis, and fever. There is other things like a flow murmur. We know in patient with ASD, VSD, and PDF, you may get increased flow murmurs. Or in a patient with aortic regurgitation, you get a, because of increased flow through the aortic valve, you get like a murmur like aortic stenosis, but it's not an organic aortic stenosis. Now there are other murmurs known as physiological causes, also known as innocent murmur, also known as Still's murmur, like a pulmonary mid-systolic peripheral pulmonary stenosis murmur, supraclavicular murmur, you may get sclerosis murmur, and mammary shuffle. So these are the physiological causes. Now let's go to the pan-systolic murmurs. Again, if anybody wants to interrupt, I'll take a 2 minutes break. Any doubts are there? Any questions?
Sir, pulmonary
Yeah.
ejection click in pulmonary stenosis,
Yeah.
it will decrease during inspiration, you told, no, sir?
Yes.
It is due to, so the duration between the click and S1 determines the severity of pulmonary stenosis.
Between the click and the S1 determines the severity.
How
I am not telling the duration. I am telling the intensity of the click decreases on inspiration. The intensity of the
yes, sir.
The intensity of the click, and I'll again repeat, the mechanism is on inspiration the venous return increases, so the RV end diastolic pressure increases. So normally the RV end diastolic pressure crosses the pulmonary artery diastolic pressure. Here, because the RV EDP is more, there is a premature opening of the pulmonary valve. When there is a premature opening, it is not opening from a wider distance, it is opening from a shorter distance, and that is why the click is softer in distance. Yeah.
Oh, yes, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Any other question? Because being a very long topic, very complex topic, if you can just keep on asking questions, but I am trying to cover as much as I can, but it's not possible actually to cover everything.
So I think that is quite a detailed one, and it is covering almost everything. So I hope students are enjoying, and if any doubts are there, definitely they can ask. This is very interesting topic, and it is kind of better to know because Viva goes on murmur most of the time.
Yes. So let's go to the pan-systolic murmur or a holosystolic murmur. Now, all of pan-systolic murmurs are pathological, and for a exam point of view, you should only remember MR, TR, and a VSD. Now, we know that the MR murmur is a high-pitched murmur. When you describe it, it is a soft blowing, it is a musical murmur, it is a high-pitched murmur. And when they ask you, is it very common for a MR murmur to have a thrill? The answer remains no. Now, why? Because a MS MDM is more likely to produce a thrill than a MR murmur, because the the blood flow goes from LV to the LA, and LV to the LA means it is going posteriorly. So when the blood is going posteriorly, it doesn't produce much of a thrill because it's going posteriorly. Whereas in MS, the blood is from the LA to the LV. So when the blood is going from coming anteriorly, LA to the L means LA to the LV, you are more likely to get a thrill. So MR is less likely to produce a thrill, being LA being a posterior chamber. So that is one of the things. Now second is where it is best, there is a radiation or a conduction. Now the next question is, how do you differentiate a holosystolic murmur of a MVP from a holosystolic murmur of a MR? Now we know that a rheumatic mitral regurgitation usually involves the anterior leaflet, and that is why the jet is posterior. Because it involves the anterior leaflet, the jet goes posteriorly, so the murmur conducts or radiates better to the axilla as compared to mitral valve prolapse, which most commonly involves the posterior leaflet. So the blood goes more anteriorly, it goes to the base of the heart, so the murmur is best conducted or radiate to the base of the heart. So that is the first important thing. Second is, in S1 in a mitral valve prolapse is usually normal or loud, as because it's a prolapsing, there is a prolapse of the mitral valve which itself produces a loud first heart sound. Second is a rheumatic MR, which usually produces a soft first heart sound. Third important difference is you may get a late systolic murmur and a mid systolic click in MVP, whereas you do not get a click in a patient with mitral valve, in a patient with rheumatic MR. So these are few differences. Now they may ask you in exam, how do you determine that this pan-systolic murmur of MR is a severe MR? Now there are points of severity in a mitral regurgitation. Like if you get a flow LVS3, if you get a flow MDM, if you get a cardiomegaly. So these three things tell that the MR is severe. A LVS3, a flow mid diastolic murmur, and a cardiomegaly. So it means that MR is severe. Thrill can also signify sometimes that MR is severe. There is one more point indicator of severity is wide and variable split. Why do you get a wide and variable split is A2 closes early because all the blood from the LV goes to the LA. So A2 closes early, and that is why you get a wide and variable split, which is an indicator of severity in mitral regurgitation. Now, similar like a mitral regurgitation, there is something known as a tricuspid regurgitation where you get a pan-systolic murmur. However, if you get in chronic TR as compared to acute TR, you get a short systolic murmur or a early systolic murmur. So, when do you get a early systolic murmur in tricuspid regurgitation is when there is acute TR or when there is RV dysfunction. So if a patient with TR develops RV dysfunction, you get a early systolic or a soft or a early systolic murmur. Similarly, ventricular septal defect, I have already discussed, a moderately sized ventricular septal defect produces a pan-systolic murmur. And similarly, when do you tell that you do not tell it severe VSD, you tell it a increased shunt. So when do you tell a shunt is more? When the shunt is more than 2:1. Clinically, you can tell it is 2:1. Means blood flow from the through the pulmonary is twice as the blood flow through the systemic circulation. So when you have LVS3, when you have again LV mid diastolic murmur, when you have a cardiomegaly, and when you have features of pulmonary artery hypertension. So this four thing tells that a VSD, the shunt is more than 2:1. Now again going to the mitral regurgitation, I told you normally the LV pressure is 120 systolic, LA pressure is around 10. So in MR the LV pressure is 110 and LA pressure becomes your 25, and that is why you get a holo throughout the systole. The gradient is maintained between the LV and the LA, and so you get a holosystolic murmur. The tricuspid regurgitation, I want to discuss one more important finding. How do you what things increases the intensity of a TR? So we know that inspiration increases the intensity of both the duration and most commonly it's the intensity of TR which increases, because on inspiration there is an increased venous return from the RA to the RV, and so the RV stroke volume increases. So inspiratory increase in TR is also known as Carvalho's sign. It is known as Carvalho's sign, and this disappear in patient with RV failure. So if the patient has RV dysfunction, you may not be able to appreciate the Carvalho's sign because RV cardiac output remains the fixed. Also in patient with tricuspid stenosis, because the blood may not be able to go from RA to RV, you do not get a Carvalho's sign. So these are the two places where you do not get a Carvalho's sign. Now next thing is a VSD. Now in VSD there are many things like what type of murmur you get. I already told you a very restrictive small VSD, you get a short or a early systolic murmur, which is decrescendo. Only in non-restrictive moderate sized VSD, you get a pansystolic murmur, whereas a non-restrictive VSD with PAH or a large with PAH, you again get early systolic murmur. And even in patients with Eisenmenger syndrome, we do not get a shunt murmur. We only get a pulmonary ejection systolic murmur. Now, how do you tell a VSD is large? If you get a flow MDM or a LVS3 and a cardiomegaly and PAH finding, we know that the shunt is large. In patient with subarterial, most common VSD is perimembranous. However, it can be subarterial VSD, which is just below the aorta. So in those patients, we usually get the murmur, which is not in the lower left sternal border, but it is usually very higher up, like in the second or the third left intercostal space. So if a VSD murmur is the second left and right, second and third left intercostal space, it may mimic a pulmonary stenosis murmur, and then it is sometimes become difficult to distinguish, and that is a subarterial VSD. Now, other causes of PSM, I told you, if a PDA is there with PH or AP, autopulmonary window is there with PH, it may mimic a pansystolic murmur. It's better you do not tell this in exam because these are the rare instances. Now, the late systolic murmurs are the MVP murmur. So I already told you why MVP murmur is late systolic, because the leaflet remains competent during early ventricular contraction, but only during the late systole there is overshoot of the leaflet, the prolapsed leaflet, and that is why you get a late systolic murmur. One more, it may have multiple mid-systolic clicks also. Now, what thing determines the loudness and intensity is anything which it goes hand in hand with the HCM types. Like if the patient stands on standing, on standing, what happens is venous return decreases, LV cavity size decreases. So the prolapse happens earlier. So the prolapse click, because of the prolapse, you get a click. Click becomes closer, the click becomes earlier, and that is why you get a longer and an increased intensity of the murmur. So anything which decreases the cavity size, like the Valsalva or the standing, it causes the early prolapse. Early prolapse causes the earlier click. That is why the murmur becomes longer and the increase in intensity. It is similar like HCM. However, anything where the LV cavity size increases, like the amyl nitrate or a squatting or a hand grip, in all these cases, the LV cavity size increasing. So the prolapse happens later. And that is why the click goes away from the first heart sound. And that is why you get a shorter murmur and you get a low intensity murmur. So this is the typical thing about MVP. There is one more cause of a late systolic murmur is tricuspid valve prolapse and papillary muscle dysfunction. So a papillary muscle dysfunction can even cause a late systolic murmur like a mitral valve prolapse and a tricuspid valve prolapse. As I told you, most of the things of HCM and MVP goes hand in hand. However, it is only the post click, post PVC, like after a ventricle, post PVC, what happens is post PVC, the HCM murmur usually increases, because post PVC, the sudden increase in LV grade HCM murmur decreases, whereas a mitral valve prolapse murmur doesn't change much. However, for the practical reason, you should always remember that all the thing which increases HCM increases the mitral valve prolapse also. Now let's go to the diastolic murmur. Again, I would like to interrupt for 1 minute if anybody has any doubt on systolic murmurs. Any doubt on systolic murmurs?
Sir, one question.
Hmm.
Why is there associated AR in high VHD?
Hmm?
In high VHD, why there is associated aortic regurgitation?
Yeah, in a VSD, there is something known as a Venturi effect. So this Venturi effect causes the production of AR. It is I need a diagram actually to tell it, but I can send you. So it is the Venturi effect which produces AR in ventricular septal defect and more commonly high VSD, like a subarterial VSD and all.
Okay, sir. This was the one question I got. Any other question student wants to ask can ask, or we can continue.
And also there is something known as this prolapse of the cusp, like the RCC, LCC. So there is a prolapse of the cusp also, which is one more reason. Actually, it's the Venturi effect which causes this prolapse, which causes this AR to be more. So it is more common in subarterial or a high VSD, right? So
Okay, sir.
yeah, so we will go to the diastolic murmur. Now this is again a very crowdy slide which tells the different diastolic murmurs. So the diastolic murmur can be early diastolic or it can be hollow diastolic. Anything which causes and it can be mid diastolic. Anything which causes early diastolic, like a severe pulmonary regurgitation, severe aortic regurgitation, they are usually hollow diastolic. It also produces an early diastolic. Now the next most important is the mid diastolic. Now this is one thing which they will ask in your exam whenever you get a mitral stenosis case. What are the other causes of mid diastolic murmur at the mid diastolic murmur? So for all the practical reason, I think you should divide it into mid diastolic murmur on the right side and mid diastolic murmur on the left side. So mid diastolic murmur on the left side, it can be first the flow murmurs. We know, we have discussed in this class, there are many flow murmurs like a MR. A MR produces a flow murmur. Similarly, a VSD, because MR LV blood goes to the LA, and later in the stage all the LA blood has to come to the LV. Similarly, VSD and PD, all the blood is coming back to the LA and that blood has to go back to the LV. So they produce a flow murmur. So flow murmur in this diseases are an indicator of severity in MR and increased shunt flow in VSD and PD. Similarly, rarely hyperdynamic like anemia, thyrotoxicosis causes flow murmur, mid diastolic murmur, but they can rarely be there. We know in patients with complete heart block, also known as a Rittan's murmur, because of the functional MR. In this patient, there is a diastolic MR. It is known as a diastolic MR because most of the MR is systolic, but in this, the MR becomes diastolic. And that is why a complete heart block produces a Rittan's murmur, which is a mid diastolic murmur. Now, second reason there can be a mid diastolic murmur is typical inflow obstruction. So the typical inflow obstruction is a mitral stenosis, but there are two diseases which mimics mitral stenosis are left atrial myxoma and cor triatriatum. In cor triatriatum, you get the LA cavity, which is divided into three parts, and you get a inflow obstruction, and a left atrial myxoma or a ball valve thrombus also produce a inflow obstruction and a mid diastolic murmur. And then we have something known as the AR or a acute rheumatic carditis. In AR, what happens is all the outer blood comes to the LV. There is a reflux of the blood, and this causes the Austin Flint murmur. Now, why this Austin Flint murmur is happening is so high jet of the blood is coming to the LV, it is hitting the anterior mitral leaflet. So that produces a functional MS, the obstruction of the valve. There is a hitting of the valve. So there is high that hitting of the valve produces a functional MS, and that is why you get a Austin Flint murmur, which is a mid diastolic murmur, and acute rheumatic carditis because of valvulitis. In acute rheumatic carditis, you get a Carey-Combs murmur, which is because of the valvulitis. You get a mid diastolic murmur. It is not the MS murmur, but it is the MR murmur. So these are the murmurs which are on the left side. Now let's see the murmur which are on the right side. So similarly, like RV inflow obstruction, like tricuspid stenosis or RA myxoma can cause. Rarely, Epstein's anomaly can cause a mid diastolic murmur. Now, flow murmurs are anything which causes increased flow. Typical is atrial septal defect. It is a typical example. Other examples are like ASDR, TAPVC and PAPVC. You can get a RSOV to RA, all the increased blood flow goes from RA to RE. You can get a Gerbots. Gerbots is nothing but LV to RA shunt. So all the blood from LV to RA goes across the tricuspid valve, and you can get in other diseases. Let's not discuss in those rare things. And then you can also get this in patients with severe PR with normal pulmonary artery hypertension. And you also get a Austin Flint murmur in a high. So PR, hypertensive PR is also known as, sorry, Graham-Still murmur, not Austin Flint, Graham-Still murmur. So these are the various causes of a diastolic murmur. Now again, I'll discuss the early diastolic murmur of AR. I have already discussed it once. It is a high pitch murmur, which is a blowing murmur, soft blowing murmur. Patient sitting and leaning forward with the diaphragm, breath held in end expiration, best heard in the neo-aortic area. Now, here the people will ask you, how do you differentiate a rheumatic AR from a aortic root dilatation etiology? A rheumatic AR is best heard in the left third intercostal space, neo-aortic area. Aortic root dilatation is best heard on the right second intercostal space. First difference. Second difference is rheumatic AR produces a soft A2, whereas a aortic root pathology produces a loud A2, banging A2. Third is a rheumatic AR has a normal sound of a murmur, whereas a aortic root dilatation due to syphilis and other causes produces a seagull murmur or a very musical quality of the murmur. So these are the different, the typical difference which they will ask you in exam. Now, aortic diastolic murmur also, AR murmur produces Austin Flint murmur. So we usually get in a severe AR, Austin Flint murmur, and it is a mid diastolic murmur. It tells that there is a severe murmur, and it is because of the blood is hitting the anterior mitral leaflet, which is producing the vibration and a functional mitral stenosis. Now, what is cholecystol murmur is if the aortic regurgitation murmur is heard even up to the axilla, it is known as a cholecystol murmur. So that is what a cholecystol murmur is. Now, this is how your aortic regurgitation murmur is. And when do you tell a AR is severe is if you get a longer murmur or a hollow diastolic murmur and peripheral signs of runoff. Now, people may, second question which they will ask you is how do you determine that it is acute AR and a chronic AR? There is no much difficulty in this question because all the signs of peripheral runoff won't be in acute AR. You won't get a LV type of apex in acute AR. You will get a normal apex. The patient will be presenting very sick. Patient will present with hypotension, pulmonary hypertension in ventilation and all. So this is how you have to differentiate. Second is you won't get collapsing pulse. You won't get other peripheral signs. You won't get down and out apex. You won't get a BP of 150 by 40 or 50. So much high pulse pressure. You will get a hypotension. Then the murmur won't be a hollow diastolic murmur. It will be soft intensity and a shorter murmur. It won't be a high pitched murmur. It will be a medium to a low pitched murmur. A chronic AR usually never produces a fourth heart sound, whereas the acute AR can produce a fourth heart sound and even a third heart sound. But third heart sound even you can get in chronic AR also. So these are the differences between an acute AR and a chronic AR. Now let's go to something which is like AR but which is not AR is pulmonary regurgitation. Let us discuss the high frequency, like people who are pulmonary artery hypertension when they get PR, also known as a Graham-Still murmur. It is a high pitched murmur as compared to the normotensive PR, which is a low pitched murmur. So it is again we get in the left upper sternal area. It is most common differential of a AR murmur. Only thing to differentiate is you get peripheral signs of AR in AR murmur. You get peripheral signs of PAH in patient with PR murmur. You may not get a collapsing pulse or a like a AR. The pulse pressure is usually normal in patients with PR. It doesn't affect much like AR. Then you have to see the clinical setting, and then you get a loud A2. Whenever you have AR, you'll get a softer second heart sound. But whenever you have a PR, because it is hypertensive, you get a loud P2. So AR murmur starts after the A2 component, whereas the PR starts after the P2 component. On expiration, because it's a left-sided event, AR murmur increases, but a hypertensive PR doesn't increase on inspiration. Why? Because the pulmonary vascular resistance is already that high that a high pressure PR cannot further increase on inspiration. So these are few of the differences between a PR and a AR. Now, how do you tell that this pulmonary regurgitation murmur is hypertensive or normotensive? Again, a hypertensive is a decrescendo murmur, whereas a normotensive is a crescendo decrescendo. It is a low pitched murmur, whereas a hypertensive is a high pitched murmur. You get other signs of PAH in hypertensive, not in a normotensive. Normotensive is a shorter duration murmur, hypertensive is a longer murmur. And a normotensive starts sometime after the P2, whereas a hypertensive starts immediately after the P2. So these are the points of differentiation between a high pressure and a non-low pressure PR. Now let's come to the mid-diastolic murmur. So mid-diastolic murmurs, I again discussed, they can be because of the incompetent valves, they can be because of the rapid filling, or there can be other causes. Now, mid-diastolic murmurs can be RV, it can be LV, or it can be others. I have already discussed with you. Just one second. So let's discuss one by one. So the mitral stenosis murmur is a, I already discussed with you, it is a low pitch, rough rumbling murmur. It is a low pitch, rough rumbling murmur. It is localized to the apex with the bell of the stethoscope with the breath held in expiration, patient in left lateral position. I think till here nobody has doubt, everybody would have heard by now a mitral stenosis murmur. Now most important thing is, when do you tell this mitral stenosis is severe? 2 points. Longer the murmur, severe the MS. Narrower the A2 opening snap gap, more severe is the MS. So the A2 and OS gap is the most important thing. Normal A2 OS gap is 100 to 140. If it is less than 80, it is definitely a critical mitral stenosis. So less than 80 means critical. So what thing affects the A2 OS gap is a severe mitral stenosis produces a narrow A2 OS. If anything which increases the left atrial pressure causes an early opening snap, because increased LA-LV gradient is there, the opening snap will occur earlier, so the narrow will be A2 OS gap. So mitral regurgitation, if it is significant associated with MS, LA pressure increases and you get a narrow A2 OS. Similarly, in patients with tachycardia, because the LA pressure rises, you get a narrow A2 OS gap. All other decreases where LV and diastolic pressure increases, you get the gradient between the LV and the LA and the LV which is less, and that is why the opening snap occurs later, like in patients with hypertension, in patients with aortic stenosis, in patients with aortic regurgitation, in older age, in patients with bradycardia. These are the cases where A2 OS gap increases. So, or also you remember, in patients with mitral stenosis, once they develop AF, you do not get presystolic accentuation and you do not get opening snap. So these are the few things which you should know about a MDM of a. So I have already discussed, you can see this in severe, there is a presystolic accentuation. So the murmur is mid-diastolic. It starts sometime after the P2. It is a, first it is a decrescendo type, and just after the opening snap, there is a presystolic accentuation. So just after the opening snap, the intensity of the murmur increases. So this is how you have to draw a murmur of a mitral stenosis. Yeah. Now similarly, like MS, there is something known as tricuspid stenosis. The difference is the MS murmur increase on expiration, this murmur increase on inspiration. It is best heard in the lower left sternal border compared to the apex. So this is how you have to distinguish between a MS and a TS. That though the organic TS is very rare, it is found only in case 5% with patient with rheumatic fever, whereas a most common is the mitral valve involvement, which is seen up to the 40% of the cases. Now another important thing is Austin Flint murmur. People may tell that it is an Austin Flint murmur or it is an MS murmur. Again, there is, you need not worry, because Austin Flint murmur will carry all other features of a AR. A mitral stenosis murmur won't carry those features of a AR. Even if the MS has associated AR, those findings of AR will not get dominated. Okay. Next important thing is, you get a loud S1, you get an opening snap, you get a presystolic accentuation, you get AF, and you get findings of pulmonary artery hypertension in MS. but not in AR with Austin Flint murmur. The only thing which can differentiate is amyl nitrate, because amyl nitrate decreases the peripheral vascular resistance, and so the AR murmur reduces. Whereas amyl nitrate, because it causes tachycardia, it causes it causes increased gradient between the LA to the LV, and that is why it causes increased intensity of the MS murmur. So MS murmur increases by amyl nitrate, whereas AR murmur decreases by amyl nitrate. So these are the other features of differentiation. I told you thrill and all, pre-systolic accentuation, amyl nitrate, S1 is loud, atrial fibrillation in common. These are all the findings which they carry with them. But the most important thing remains the pre-systolic accentuation, loud S1, opening snap, pH finding, and amyl nitrate. Now let's come to the other dead diastolic murmurs like MS murmurs. Yeah. So what we know that the MS murmur is usually we get a longer murmur, So which are the cases where the MS murmur may not be the very soft intensity of MS murmur are in patients with calcified valve. So if a patient has a very high calcified valve, you may not be able to get a good murmur. Also in patient with associated severe aortic regurgitation and stenosis, you may not be able to get a, because the LVEDP increases, the gradient between LA and LV comes down. In patients with cardiac failure of LV dysfunction, again LVEDP increases, pressure gradient between LA and LV decreases. In patients who have longer RR cycle, like in bradycardia, we may not be able to appreciate a good murmur. Or in patients with COPD, emphysema, we may not be able to feel the murmur. And people will ask you, what is silent MS? So silent MS is in patients with MS with severe PAH. You may not be able to hear the murmur in the apex, but you will hear it somewhere in the axilla. So it is, you may get a silent MS. In patients with associated tricuspid stenosis, you may not be able to hear it, mitral stenosis murmur. If the patient is obese or if the apex is lying behind the rib, you may not be able to hear a murmur. So these are the cases of a silent MS. Now again, what is Carey-Coombs murmur is in patient with acute rheumatic fever, there is a valvular valvulitis. And that is why you get a murmur of MR murmur, which is usually a mid-diastolic murmur. It is low pitch, like all other MDMs are low pitch except Austin Flint, which is a high pitch. And Carey-Coombs murmur, it means there is acute carditis. It means there is acute rheumatic fever. So if a patient has a Carey-Coombs previous established rheumatic heart disease and you are getting a Carey-Coombs murmur, it means he has a recent acute rheumatic fever. Now there are other common causes of mid-diastolic murmur. I won't go to the detail. Something known as a Dock's murmur, which is a stenosis of left anterior descending artery, or a Cabot-Locke murmur, which you get in aortic insufficiency, which you get similar to aortic insufficiency, and it is due to anemia, flow murmur. Key-Hodgkin's murmur you get in a patient with syphilis, because first it was told by Hodgkins, and you get in syphilis the early diastolic murmur of AR, which is a raspy quality, or seesaw or sawwood murmur. It is called as a sawwood murmur. You get a complete heart block, as I already told you. It is a Rittan's murmur because it is a diastolic MR which produces this murmur. So I think I would like to conclude here. I won't confuse you further with the continuous murmur. I think that we'll discuss continuous murmur along with the dynamic auscultation in the next class. Is that fine, Sanket?
Yes, sir, no problem.
Because I have left the dynamic auscultation, we'll take continuous murmur and diastolic dynamic auscultation together.
Yeah, that we can do. Yes.
So I think maybe some few doubts or many doubts will. Any doubt is there?
Yeah, you can ask directly, or we can even go on the group. Sir is already there in group, so you can message him.
Sir, any reason for why Austin Flint is high pitch, but the other mid diastolic events are all low pitch, sir?
Yeah, see, there are many theories of the Austin Flint murmur. The most important, which I told you, is a vibrations of the anterior mitral leaflet. So what happens is that is one reason, because they resonate with high frequency. This anterior mitral leaflet resonate with very high frequency. The one of the important second mechanism of Austin Flint is all the high frequency AR component, because of the eddy currents, are conducted to the apex, and that is why you get a high frequency Austin Flint. So the eddy current, all the high frequencies are conducted to the apex. That is one of the second mechanism of a Austin Flint murmur. Besides that, you also get a functional MR, you get a functional MS. So these are the other mechanisms of Austin Flint, and that is why it is usually a high frequency murmur.